Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you why Rode is about to dominate the audio field. And I didn't say podcast field. I said audio field. I'm still waiting on my Roadcaster Pro 2. I mean, it is coming from Australia, and that is like really far away. The furthest country from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada is literally Australia. So yeah, it's going to be a bit. That said, I figured it would be fun to see exactly how the new unit is going to destroy most of its enemies and pretty much take over the world. Let's take a look at the history of ye olde RCP and see how we got here. It was January 16th of 2019 that the Rodecaster Pro was released. Now, depending on where you were in the world at the time, that date might sway a month either way. And while Rode had been hammering away at the podcasting industry with products since the mid-aughts, this was easily one of their biggest releases. And while this thing seemingly overtook the world as the go-to solution for podcasters, it wasn't the first of its kind. In fact, a mere 3 years prior, Tascam released what they thought was the perfect podcasting interface with the US 42B Mini Studio Creator. It was the actual first ever podcast station studio. I mean, it had it all, kinda. Including the sound pads and reverb. Because, you know, what podcast doesn't need more reverb? But as fate would see fit, the naming convention was to blame as it didn't really stand out. Mini Studio just sounded like it was another Porta Studio in the Tascam lineup. This is literally a quote from someone at their company. One of those ahead of its time things, and had the wrong name. Can't imagine why though. US 42B just kind of rolls off the tongue, right? And before you judge this thing too harshly, it actually had some decent specs, including 24-bit 96 kilohertz. But alas, those fancy numbers meant nothing to a lot of people that were in the podcast space at the time. This is where the Rodecaster Pro separated itself from the field. You see, the audio field has always had this thing with complexity. There's always been a learning curve for boards and interfaces, which was always counterintuitive to the very heart of podcasting, the basic tenet that anyone could do it. And Rode made that dream a reality. The Rodecaster Pro was created to be a single button fix to a myriad of issues. You didn't need to understand routing to get a mix minus. The idea of learning how to EQ? Is your voice bassy? Well, here's your one-button approach. Can't drive your dynamic mic hard enough? Here, have some compression. Don't ask how it works. Just push the button. And it was brilliant. And while those options have expanded for more customization since, these were the decisions that endeared the RCP to literally everyone. It made the complexities of broadcast accessible to the podcast. Not to mention, it was a statement piece. I mean, it was literally gorgeous. It was hard not to look at the thing and just want one. It became the must-have if you were going to be a podcaster. And I mean, it seems it really was. Even the Army and WandaVision used one for their podcast. It literally became ubiquitous. Not a word I like to use often, but my God, it can be fun to say. So if this thing is the second coming, why are we getting a new one? Well, there were some shortcomings with the original, and while I have been scorned for speaking ill of the Almighty, some of this stuff does bear repeating. You see, there have been a bunch of updates to the Rodecaster Pro over the years, and a lot of quirks that were fixed in those updates. But not everything could be fixed with the updates, including the gain, which was anemic at best at only 50 dB, and then the EIN, which is basically the amount of noise put out by the unit. I'll spare you the technical details there. But the Rodecaster Pro was lagging far behind in those two respects as the rest of the world was moving on to super clean gain. And you can see the competitors trying to attack those weaknesses. Zoom took a fantastic swing with the PodTrack P4, a great little unit, but that was mostly due to its price to performance. The P8 was a swing and a miss for that very reason. The Tascam Mixcast 4 was a stroke of brilliance. It actually solved most of these problems, but it was a tad late to the party, which was kind of sad for them. And while the rest of the world was trying to play catch-up, Rode was working on their next step. And if you're to believe the product specs, well, this is going to be a bloodbath for any and all competitors, including the original Rodecaster Pro. How does this all completely change the audio world? Well, for one, Rode is about to dominate the podcast sphere in a way that has never been seen. There will be no rival for the new unit, and all those first-gen RCPs are going to enter the used markets at hugely discounted prices, which means their price to performance is going to skyrocket as well. Think about it. A brand new Mixcast 4 for $550, or use Rodecaster Pro for $250 or $300. That alone is going to give Rode the absolute field for any and all podcast production gear. Even the P4 is going to hurt here. Yeah, it's still going to be cheaper, but how much cheaper? All this, though, is dependent on any of those other companies not moving fast and releasing something competitive right now. As far as I can tell, I don't think that's about to happen. Rode is creating their own little ecosystem. They're doing it really well. I promise, as soon as I have the unit in my hands, the videos will start to flow. And while you're waiting for those videos to pop up, why not have a trip down memory lane with the first review I did of the original? It might trigger a few you people, though. Sorry.